Scotland, a land, a nation, a people built on diversity, culture, and tremendous archaeology. In this year of history, heritage, and archaeology, we go on to discover the saga that has led to a modern Scotland consisting of diversity, multicultural practices, and a rich history dating back to extraordinary paleontology.
I'm a writer and broadcaster, and over the years I've done programmes about people coming to live in Scotland and Scots going to live elsewhere in the world.
Modern Scotland's story is rich in history. Our social, economic and cultural infrastructures has been influenced by considerable immigration to Scotland from 1800 onwards. Can you tell us more about where these global citizens came from?
Scotland with England was at that time regarded as the workshop of the world. So there was a tremendous amount of buoyant and dynamic economic activity which sucked in migrants from abroad. So you had eventually by 1914 Jews, Italians, Lithuanians, Poles. And the one nationality we hear very little about because they're actually quite difficult to trace are the English.
Scotland is no different to any other country where that's the case, and many of the people who have migrated to Scotland have come from different countries. One of the key groups to focus on since the 1800s, of course, would be the Irish who came to settle here, and also the Italian populations.
Great examples of cultural success in Scotland have come from mixing up traditions and cultures from around the world.
So with Africa in Motion, we want to highlight, look at the legacy of the slave trade and how that influenced Scottish society. I think, especially in Glasgow and in Edinburgh, I think people don't realise that they were two of the main hubs involved in the slave trade. I think people know about Liverpool, they know about Bristol. Maybe Glasgow is not the first place you think when you think of Britain's involvement in the slave trade.
Where are your ancestors and family members from?
My family members are from Africa, from Ghana to be specific. My whole entire family is Ghanaian.
Well, they came from Poland, Lviv, which became eventually part of Ukraine when Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill handed over that part of Poland, southeastern part of Poland.
Been based in Edinburgh for the last 17 years, since 1999.
And we originally come from Afghanistan.
I'm originally from Algeria. So I am half Scottish and half Jamaican. On my mum's side, so my mum's Scottish, and some of the family are Scottish-Irish, so they've been, I guess, maybe second generation for her, but then also my grandmother's family lived in Scotland for a very long time.
I am half Guyanese and half English. I moved to Scotland 10 years ago to study at university. I was born in Guyana in the Caribbean, and me and my family moved to England in 1990.
I'm born in England and my parents are from the Caribbean. My dad is from Barbados and my mum is from St. Vincent.
Originally I came from Russia, from Urals mountain, which is not far from Siberia. It's the edge of Siberia.
To begin with, Scotland has always been a multilingual and multicultural society. When the towns were being created 8 centuries ago, when cities like Dundee and the old towns like Perth, when the royal boroughs were instituted, the royal proclamations addressing the people who lived in the boroughs, in the towns, was to Scotis et Anglis, Francis et Flemingis, to the Scots, English, French and Flemish.
The thing to bear in mind is, A, it was big, there was about almost 250,000 first generation Irish in Scotland by 1900. And the second thing is, they were not all Catholic, as the myth has it. probably between a quarter to a third of them were Protestant people from Ulster.
And so I think these waves of migration are felt very strongly in our cultural traditions, in the things we celebrate, and have been formed by the way in which migrations to Scotland have happened over many years.
To understand the value of immigration within Scotland society and within culture generally, you have to look at what immigration has brought to Scots.
There never has been anything like an ethnic Scottish identity. It's always been, in the words of one of our writers, William McIlvanney, it's always been proudly mongrel in its identity. In other words, there have always been different groups who've called themselves Scots. And I think that's one of the strengths of Scotland, that you don't have to have grandparents born here to feel Scottish.
The Scottish people have, over the last 200 years, emigrated across the world, travelled, sometimes to find a better life, sometimes to study, sometimes to teach, but always hopefully to learn from other cultures. And I think that that's the most important thing that shapes a people, really, is their ability to travel and learn from other cultures.
But so ubiquitous, so widespread were Scottish pedlars in Poland and Prussia that the word for a pedlar and a Scot was the same. The word in German, der Schotte, also meant a pedlar. And so ubiquitous were they that a mother wanting to frighten a child who was being naughty, the mother would say to them, I don't know the Polish version of it, but the German version of it was, Warte bis der Schotte kommt. You wait or the Scots will come and take you away, steal you away. The bogeyman was the Scots, because we were the only foreigners that were coming across. So we were the other there. You just simply want to belong, therefore you do belong. So that idea of a multi-ethnic and multilingual Scotland has been around for centuries.
When did you or your family come to Scotland?
I came to Scotland actually in the 90s for a stint, and then came back to Scotland after that in 2004. I came up to study Strathclyde University, and pretty much stayed since then. So I'd say first time my father came to Scotland in 94, I think it was actually.
My mum came to this country when she was 8, so I think it may be going to late 50s, early 60s, and it's roughly the same with my dad as well. My grandparents came in like 1955.
That's the place where I came in 1999. I loved the place. I never moved out.
I moved to Scotland since 2002 with my husband and my daughter, and my son was born in Glasgow.
British said, we had enough of you. You've done enough of fighting. You should go back home. So I said, where is my home? And there's no home because you've given it to the Ukrainians. And so eventually they made all the arrangements for the Polish units to be disbanded and settled in Britain. I was very happy because I was settled in Fife in Scotland.
We came to Scotland in 2001 and I established family thereafter.
You also had in that period a lot of French people because of the old alliance between Scotland and France. You had substantial French colonies in Scotland. For example, there's an area around Craigmillar Castle in Edinburgh called Little France, and that was because of the number of French people that settled there in the 15th and 16th century. So that's an old migration. So I find it fascinating that when you have people complaining about the migration of Poles to Scotland and then becoming too numerous, I think a lot of these people have probably Scottish blood in their veins because of the big migration to Poland in the 17th century.
As a historian or lover of history, Which era would you travel back in time to, and why?
The place in Scotland I would like to travel back to is actually the archaeological site of Kilmartin Glen, which utterly fascinates me, and it's a Neolithic site. It's almost prehistoric in many ways, and it's one of the most important sites on the British mainland for burial practice in particular. It's full of the most extraordinary, intriguing cup and ring marks on stones.
If I had the time machine, I would go back to maybe around about 1700 and maybe hopefully meet J.S. Bach in a bar somewhere for a beer, have a chat to him. Because at the same time as that really exciting moment where Baroque music was evolving, at that same time, folk music, particularly in Europe, was performed in a very raw style, had not been influenced by Victorian airs and graces. So it was very much the music of the people.
Well, first of all, I would like to have modern medical services. And if I could take them with me, I think the 18th century would undeniably be the best time. First of all, it was a tremendous era of intellectual achievement. And also it was the period between, if you like, some of the rigid Calvinism of the 17th century and a much more relaxed and more civilised way of life in the 18th century. And it was also the period, probably the last quartile of the 18th century, when modern Scotland was born. That's when you have the Enlightenment, the origins of the agricultural revolution, the beginnings of Highland change, and above all, of course, industrialisation and urbanisation. It was an amazingly exciting time, and not only that, as far as a personal and selfish personal perspective, the professoriate of the universities were regarded as the intellectual aristocracy of the country.
Several incidents I'd love to have been a witness of. One is the marriage of our King James V to Madeleine de Valois, which took place in Notre Dame Cathedral. In Scotland, the period I would love to have been in Scotland was when Robert Burns and the poet Robert Ferguson, late 18th century, the period of the Enlightenment in Scotland, where someone described Edinburgh as being a place where you could stand in the high street and within an hour you could meet 50 men of genius and shake them by the hand.
I'd say the 1960s. It's an era that, I guess, in Western society and in many societies across the world represents freedom and liberation. So in America and in the UK there was the hippie movement, which is like free-spirited, free living. There's also a lot of demands for women's rights, and then also across Africa there was the freedom from colonization. Of a lot of African countries reached liberation in the 1960s.
Outside of your personal experience, are there any historical links between where you come from and Scotland?
I think the obvious would probably be that Ghana obviously is a Commonwealth country, so Ghana was a British colony for a very long time and gained independence on the 6th of March in 1957. So I think that would be the most obvious historical link between the two countries. I've got a strange feeling, don't quote me, but I think ex-President Jerry John Rawlings is half Scottish. I'm not sure, but yeah, maybe. I think those are like the historical links between Ghana and Scotland.
India was ruled by British for 200 years or so. There were certain aspects of education and other things which is there in India. The driving, we drive on the left just like here, so those things are similar. But in terms of differences, yes, there are quite a drastic difference. And India is also not a monolithic culture. You go from one part of India to the other, there are different cultures.
The Caribbean is historically linked to Scotland through the Atlantic slave trade. My name is Ashanti because my family were actually originally from Ghana, and I think a little bit of that is people that were brought from the Ashanti tribe in Ghana over to Guyana via the Atlantic slave trade. And then also some of the largest plantations in Guyana were actually Scottish. So you find quite a lot of Scottish heritage in Guyana, which is really interesting and strange to see it there. And I guess you find a lot of Caribbean heritage here, like in the food that we eat and the names of the streets in Glasgow.
Without Scotland, Russia would be not the same, because when I research the history, I find out a lot of kings, for example, Ivan the Terrible, and also Peter I, and the Tsars who was after them, they have got a lot of links with Scotland.
Scotland's diverse communities have helped form the tartan of the nation. Integration is very important. Where do you see Scotland in the next 50 years? And what can be done to champion integration predicated on celebrating diversity?
By referring to the culture and the history. In a way, not to integrate is against the Scottish tradition. There's a wonderful poem by Hugh MacDiarmid, which has 2 lines in it, which I often quote, and it is, "To be yoursel and to make that worth being, nae harder job to mortals has been given." And that gets to the essence of multiculturalism. You want everyone who lives in Scotland to be proud of who they are and to celebrate their own culture. And by doing that, adding to the great mixture of multiculturalism that is Scotland today. I want people to feel Scottish, but not at the expense of their own culture. I don't think people should lose their own identity to become part of something else.
If we're not hospitable to other people, we can't integrate new ways of being, new ways of knowing, new ways of seeing and believing into our fabric of our society. We can't make new tartan, we can't make new cloth, we can't weave new patterns, we might not be able to use new technologies. A home that nobody visits is a desperately lonely place. And that's true of countries which close their borders.
And we know also that almost every academic study we have that has been carried out on this, including a book that I'm currently editing on immigrant communities to Scotland since 1945, shows that this form of immigration positively enriches the nation, socially, culturally, and economically. So in terms of ensuring integration, not assimilation, that's not the way forward. Integration. This kind of message has got to go out loud and clear from people who have seriously studied the subject, rather than those who are simply reading tabloid newspapers and getting second-hand prejudiced views in pubs about immigration. All the academic studies in Scotland carried out to date, non-partisan studies, have shown that immigration with an I, not immigration, immigration is a good thing for this country.
It's not, the idea of us being the same is not so great. I think the idea of us all being different is what makes us great.
Scotland's heritage is in a state of constant evolution, continually influenced by the global communities of citizens who live and work in Scotland. What can Civic Scotland do as a collective to champion the confident, dynamic, and inclusive society we all aspire to live in?
The Scottish Government celebrates that diversity. And I mean, Nicola Sturgeon on Twitter, if there's any big celebration of Eid or any of the, or if there's a Polish celebration in Glasgow, you will see her mention that. So she deliberately, as the head of the nation, if you like, wants to celebrate that and insists that that is the kind of Scotland we want to live on.
I'm wearing a jacket that was made by Nadine Suatodra, who is a fabric artist and fashion designer who lives and works in Glasgow. She is Ghanaian by birth. She very much understands herself as a proud and new Scot, and she loves the diversity work that she does here with many different communities. So in my room is the whole world gathered here. Celebrations perhaps of the diversity which is endless, of human making and doing. If we wish to continue to be a nation that tries hard, the hard work of integrating the practice of hospitality, the care it takes around its borders and its understanding of inclusive citizenship, then we can be a place that is as magnificently beautiful as these objects are, with all the stories that come with them that we can learn from other people.
Well, of course, there is a major threat to this at the moment in the form of Brexit, which I think has been a spectacular own goal for Britain, and the outcomes, as we speak, are still very problematic. So it's very important that our government, our civil society, our local authorities, etc., and of course not least our institutions of higher education, stand up for the kind of Scotland that we've been just discussing, a Scotland of ethnic variety, but sharing one thing in common: a pride in the nation and a commitment to ensuring that the communities of Scotland, flourish in the future.
How do we share what we have between us? Because that's our way of celebrating diversity and celebrating what it is that's been given to us.
We're celebrating the 2017 Year of History, Heritage and Archaeology. What does that mean for the name community in Scotland?
For me, it means it's like an opportunity to learn more about my heritage, learn more about the links between myself and the country in which I live in, and also to make me feel more confident in my identity.
My background working with the festival, with Celtic Connections, this last few years has had music from over 40 countries. Communities within Scotland that have integrated musicians from all around the world. Culturally, we need to think about social cohesion in a way that is positive for not only inhabitants of Scotland that have been here all their lives, but also incoming people.
We believe that Scotland's diverse communities are a huge asset to our shared nation. What will you be doing to celebrate this year?
We are part of this celebration. We are celebrating this event. This means a lot to us. And in this event, we are showing the active work that we are doing, like an active citizen of Scotland, participating on everything that affects Scotland, which is matter to Scotland, because we live here, our family live in here, and we feel it's very, very important that we know about the history, heritage, and about Scotland. Our children knows about these values as well.
As a representative and the chairperson of International Women's Group, this year we are going to celebrate the history in Scotland, and the idea of the group is to know about women's history in Scotland, to ask them question about women's history in their own countries. So that's a good opportunity for all the group to learn from each other and enriching their knowledge about women's history in Scotland.
Who or what is your favorite historical figure or event? It can be anyone at any time across the world.
Collectively, one of our favourite historical figures is Nina Simone.
She wasn't afraid to speak without filters and to be direct and express her anger to the world, and that I think made people feel passionate and saw the fear and the sadness of oppression in the world.
Do you say Nelson Mandela? Do you say, Nelson Mandela becoming the president of South Africa? Do you say Martin Luther King? Do you say Black Stars almost winning, almost getting to the final of the World Cup? Do you say Jesus Christ?
I always admire the scientists. I admire Peter Higgs and Lomonosov, for example, that's a Russian scientist. And I always admire people who can stand by what they are saying, who can persist what whatever their aims are.
On St. Andrew's Day in 2016, BEMIS held a conference entitled Combined by Our Humanity, Enhanced by Our Diversity. What does that statement mean to you?
I think that statement to me means that you learn more from others, you learn from different cultures. It helps you to grow as a person, to expand your sense of place in the world, expand how you understand how different people live across the world.
St. Andrews, a historical figure of Scotland. Our children, our family, our community must know about Scottish value while we are living in here, because we believe we are an active citizen, we are equal, we are Scottish.
I would hope the kind of Scotland I want would celebrate that kind of statement. And I hope that tradition, which has been part of Scotland's DNA for at least 8 centuries, will continue into the 21st and 22nd centuries.
To me, it means that we're all people first, right? I think that's what makes Scotland a very special place, that we celebrate the fact that we're all human. So we celebrate our humanness, and celebrate our humanness is about celebrating, our differences, our weaknesses, and loving each other. And I think I've found that a lot in Scotland.
Combining our hospitality and celebrating our diversity, we become more than just the roles we perform. So I become more than simply a professor at the University of Glasgow. I become somebody who has climbed a mountain, or who lives near a river, or who has a mum and dad and a daughter. And that makes me accessible as a human being. It takes the borders away that can often attract to roles, particularly elite roles like my own. And it allows people to encounter me as somebody who they can understand as a human being just like themselves.
We're all the same, but our differences is what makes us all unique and special, and it makes the world a really great place. Yeah. There's people who have Scottish roots who are from Jamaica, as well as obviously African roots. It's just a melting pot of different cultures, really. And like us three, we're a melting pot of the Caribbean and Scotland.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sums up my own thinking on, if you like, the immigration and population history of Scotland. You've got to remember that probably until the 1980s and 1990s, there was a kind of bland uniformity in Scotland, in the sense that the migrations that were occurring were from particular cultures, usually white. But now we've got a tremendous range of people coming in. I mean, I've actually heard there is a school in one part of Glasgow, a Catholic school, where there's 45 different nationalities in that small primary. Obviously that poses challenges for teachers, but it's a wonderful melting pot for children growing up with that range of cultural influences. I hope this particular wave of migrants will not have that experience, and the Scots in the future will look back as seeing this as a period, as a process which has actually enriched the nation in the ways I said before, culturally, economically, in other ways as well.
We all come from different parts of the world, and we have different culture, different upbringing, different kind of beliefs and religion, and we have got all type of different tradition. But I think we should exchange our views, we should exchange our experience, and we should help each other, and we should show each other how we can make this world better.
For us to reconcile with our pasts and our differences, we need to make sure that the people who are implicated and who have the most knowledge by experience of injustice are in the room all the time, not just for one token meeting or one conference, but all the time in the work they do. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoy working with BEMIS, because that's what I see practiced as a principle of human rights all the time.
Finally, what does Scotland mean to you?
Actually, Scotland meant everything to me, because I was always did something that was improved my Scottish part of life.
Well, I think it's become your home, hasn't it?
Well, that's what I meant. That it became part of me.
It's my home. and my children's home. So it's our home. Scotland is our home.
Scotland has inspired me a lot. You know, I've spent a lot of very important years of my life in Scotland, so it's inspired me, and it's kind of structured the way, you know, I've grown up. Home.
Scotland means home to me. Scotland is my home, my children's home.
It's mean home.
It doesn't mean that we've achieved everything we want to achieve, but what it does indicate is that there's a lot of, there's a solidarity and a community spirit within the diverse groups in Scotland and Scottish society in general, which we look to harness and drive forward.
One of the biggest mistakes that minorities have functioned in the past is to allow their ethnicities to operate above their citizenship. For us, we believe that our citizenship comes on top, and below that we all function as active citizens. We have the right to celebrate and participate and sustain our own ethnicity and culture and heritage. However, participation in the themed years is one of the areas where we can progress participative democracy for the diverse communities, and we enable their platform to function as active citizens, and we pride ourselves in Scotland in this setting.
The 2017 Year of History, Heritage and Archaeology enables Scotland to celebrate a rich tapestry of experiences, stories and traditions which reflect our unique cultural landscape. We value Scotland's diverse ethnic and cultural minority communities, the contribution they make and the important role that they play in enriching Scotland socially, culturally and economically. And of course, in 2017, Scotland has never been more diverse. The living traditions of Scotland, such as our music, art, dance and languages, are shared characteristics inherent in all of us. Our celebration of Scotland's history and heritage encompasses our diverse, multi-generational Asian, Arab, African, European and global citizens who have helped shape Scotland's destiny and who contribute with vigour to our evolving, living traditions and our inclusive national identity. We extend warm congratulations to everyone who will participate in this year's BEMIS-led celebrations. In Scotland, we believe that we are enhanced by our diversity and combined by our humanity. Your community-based events, along with the fantastic Global Burn Supper organised by BEMIS and Celtic Connections, reflect our commitment to bring Scotland to the world, hand in hand with our mosaic of people, communities, identities and aspirations. The Scottish Government's shared vision with BEMIS and partners is of a Scotland that is equal, inclusive and responsive. Scotland's Year of History, Heritage and Archaeology, alongside other major events like the Winter Festivals and the 2018 Year of Young People, present the perfect opportunity to celebrate our shared history, develop our common heritage and articulate our future aspirations. Thank you to all of you for being a part of it.